1999, I found the Christian literature in the storage place. I was working for an alarm company at the Port of Brownsville, and I ran across the Bibles and all of the Christian literature. And I realized that there was some type of a mission or a church there of some kind, but obviously they had put all this stuff in storage. So I went and I asked about it, and I met with the pastor, and he showed me what he did. He explained what the Seaman Center was, because I had volunteered my help, more or less, that I would help at the Seaman Center. And he saw me several times, brought me out there and showed me. We went on the ships. We got some guys off the ships. We brought them to Walmart, brought them to make phone calls and stuff, whatever they wanted to do. And the third time I ever met with him, he told me that he believed that God wanted him to give me the Seaman Center. And he did. He turned over the keys, turned over the van, got my stuff for my information for the insurance and stuff, and more or less turned the Seaman Center over to me. And for 9 years, I did a full-time volunteer work for the guys that come in on the ship, those 20 to 30 of them per ship, and we had approximately 20 ships a month. So we almost always had ships in the port, and I would help them 24 hours a day and rest whenever I wasn't helping them. And I did it for 9 years. And towards the end of that, I saw Steve out there at the port, and I had warned them that they're going to get kicked out of there if the port police find them. And a couple days later, I got a phone call, and that they had found this guy out there, and that they had ordered him off the property, and they knew that I could help him. So I went out there, and I helped them collect all of their stuff off of the port property, and I brought him to a friend of mine's condo in Port Isabel to stay, because I was staying with my girlfriend at the time. So they stayed out there for a couple of days, and then I got arranged, because we didn't have any money, I arranged to have him in a house here at the property where we are now.
Yeah.
And then I got this for him permanently, because at that time he was not presentable in any way. He had an odor that was extremely strong. Being in a vehicle was not possible at that point. He had large sores from his knees all the way onto his feet, and there was fly larvae, a lot, and it was very bad. And at that time, I attempted to treat him. I had no idea what I was dealing with, but the more I learned about the phlebitis disease, I learned different ways to treat it, that putting salves and stuff on it to nourish the skin to get it to grow back, because that's the problem. The skin doesn't grow back. It stays as open wounds. So it took 6 years, and all of the tissue on his legs has returned. It's not healthy skin, because the phlebitis condition, it continues to erupt with ulcers. But it's under control. I have it under control now. It's taken a long time.
So when you first found him, he had his obvious, when you see him, he had this smell to him, and you couldn't take him anywhere. It made it really difficult for people to want to be around him or help him or even find him a place to live.
No, you could not.
Where was he living at the time when you picked him up?
He was in a tent. They had tents, and they were set out hiding in the woods.
So he was living in the woods.
Yes.
And it was because, well, you can't live in a house.
Yeah, he always told me that nobody will rent him a house, that if they do rent him the house, they'll just steal the money from him and kick him out. And I heard horror stories, and I didn't really believe it until we tried to start putting him in it. I brought him to another place. This was just temporary. I got this property, and I brought him, and I got him in a house for $250 a month. We moved him in. 5 days later, the lady is serving us with an eviction notice because she wants another $250. Well, of course, we didn't have it. So it's a month and a half that we had him there. The first month we paid for, and he stayed pretty much out of sight. But after he got familiar with the place, he would walk out in the front yard, stand there with his hands behind his back, and the people in the neighborhood were complaining that he's a weirdo and he just stands out there, and they didn't like it. He made them very uncomfortable. She put us an eviction notice and got us kicked out.
How would you describe his mental status? His being able to socialize with people, or handle himself as an adult. Like how would you explain his?
He's like a child. The simplest way to say it, he's like a 5 or a 6-year-old child. He has a lot of intelligence about, all different stuff because so he's had a lot of experience in his life, but rationalizing and making just good decisions, he does not. He makes decisions as if he was a child.
So normally somebody would be able to find help this situation. Some people are able to find assistance or can find homes. There's places for people that have mental disabilities like he does. But he was in a home.
He was in a care facility until he was 31 years old, a state care facility.
Because of these kind of problems.
Yes. He was mentally challenged.
His family wasn't able to, or wasn't.
No, his mother and his father died. His uncle was supposed to have taken care of that situation, but they were mean to him. They threatened him and blamed his mother's death on him and all kinds of stuff. You know how people are cruel when you can't defend yourself like that. So he ran away.
And that's why
from what I understand, that he was freed by the state, and then he ran away from his uncles because I'm sure that he was put in the care of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big 15-year blank spot that I don't know about. I know he's lived on the street for quite a while, just living off of his Social Security check, which.
And he's probably been traumatized by this entire situation to the point he would not seek help. His legs have gotten in this position, aside from other causes of phlebitis, but being able to seek help wasn't within his own ability.
Doctors only have hurt him in the past. That's the way he sees it. So he refused to go to doctors for years. I tried to get him to go, and he refused to go to doctors. They're only going to cut him. They're only going to hurt him. So finally, when I got sick about 2.5 years ago, I forced him to go. I brought him to the healthcare place, and I had their nurse look at him. I was not employed by any healthcare or anything like that, but I was referred to these people valley-wide, and I brought him there, and they said, bring him immediately to Dr. Bondi. So we brought him to Dr. Bondi, and Bondi would not even go in the room with him. He opened the door and looked at him and said, we're going to admit him in the emergency room under quarantine. And I said, well, what about the $100? We had to give him $100 for him to see him. All he did was peek at him in the room. And I said, well, what about the $100? He says, oh, that was for the office business visit. And I said, this man doesn't have any money, And he said, no, that's policy. That's the office visit. So we bring him to the hospital. He was in the hospital for about a week. They very little treated his wounds. They didn't really do anything to his wounds except for clean them and bandage them. And At that time, when I brought him in the hospital, there was still large holes deep into his flesh. It hadn't filled all the way up. Now it's all filled up and healed. We've gotten it under control. Then we brought him to...
But that was under your own care, not theirs.
Right. No, nobody, no medical people at all have treated him. They all tell me not to treat him. To let the condition get bad and kill him.
And this was
more or less
all of this,
and
these recent events where you did have to go to the hospital, and this whole reason we're doing this site and everything.
This is the first time, 2.5 years ago, I brought him to the doctor. We brought him to the wound care doctor. And I would bring him once a week. And he cut large areas of flesh off of his shins every time we go in there. And I asked him, why? Why are you doing that? Oh, it's so that we can get the blood flow going. Well, after a month, we were there 3 times. He cut him every time, cut large, and his legs were every week progressively worse, with much larger wounds on the fronts of his legs. And Steve told him, the 4th time we went there, Steve told him, I don't want you to cut my legs. He stood up immediately and he said, you're going to have to find another doctor. I'm not going to treat you anymore. We got a bill. He makes $1,250 every time he's able to cut. The last visit that we went, he could only charge him $75 for the visit because he wasn't able to cut his legs. And if he wasn't able to cut him, he wasn't going to be able to see him anymore. It took 9 months for me to get the flesh back, to grow back on his legs. 9 months after that, doctor. And I was convinced that Steve was right. They are not going to help him. They're only going to make him worse. Then he hit a tree with the top of his head. And over the next year, his legs got completely healed, but this wound on the top of his head wouldn't heal. And it slowly got larger and larger. In November of 2014, the head wound was growing at a very fast rate. The growth was growing around the wound and infecting up. I brought him into the hospital I brought him to the emergency room to get some treatment. They got him in the hospital. He refused them to treat the wound or to take a biopsy or to do anything. So they called me up and released him to me. Said he's not willing to take any treatments. We can't keep him here. So I brought him home and continued to try and treat it. And it got overwhelming. We were not receiving any help, no bandages. All he had to do, he refused, the nurse that came to the house, he refused to give blood pressure. He was uncomfortable because APS, the Adult Protective Services and everything, kept coming to the house and asking him all these questions about putting him in a home. And he would get very upset. So if anybody come in, he refused treatment. So for 9 months, we have not received any bandages, anything, no prescriptions, nothing, because of his refuse, not cooperating.
And this adds up quickly.
Yes. No, it costs $25, $30 a day. It matters which supplies I have to buy. And I can usually afford it. I usually am working, have a good job. But his care has gotten so that it takes full-time care for him. And so I went through the thing of trying to get reevaluated so that we could get some paid hours so I can take care of him, so I could at least be able to buy the bandages and everything or get bandages from them. We put him in the hospital again. They put him in a care facility. I had to get the APS to get the sheriff and the paramedics to come and pick him up to try and force them to treat him. They went to a court hearing and to see if he was mentally stable. They had 3 different doctors look at him, and everybody says that he's mentally stable, that he can make his own decisions, and that they were releasing him. And I said, I cannot take care of him. They said, well, we're going to put him in a homeless shelter where he'll receive no care, and he'll just be pushed out onto the street, more or less. So I took him back, but I demanded in the court that I get help. I need help with bandages. I need help with, otherwise I can't take him back. And so immediately they bought me bandages from Walmart. She went to the social worker went to the store and bought bandages from Walmart. And a month later, the APS, or the Department of Aging and Disability, came, evaluated the situation, and said that he doesn't need any aid, any more hours. He doesn't need anything, that he's fine, and that he's able to make his own decisions. They're using all the courtroom language to tell me that no, they can't help me.
But it's absolutely obvious that this
it's completely ridiculous. We had a judge, the 2 lawyers, the district attorney, and the social worker from the state. All of them were aware he is living in an uninhabitable situation. It's been evaluated by everyone. He should not be there. Yet 5 people in that courtroom that have the power to do something about it all wash their hands of the situation. He can make his own decisions. We'll put him back in the home, in the place where he wants to go. He can go wherever he wants. We can make his own decisions. So he's back in my hands. And for a full month, I've been treating him, and the wounds that he received while he was in the Ebony Lake Rehabilitation Center and in the hospital is atrocious. It's going to take another 5 months to get him healed back again to where he was in December, when I was crying out for help, and all they did was set him back further. So, and after going through all of this stuff again, which I went through a couple of years ago when we first tried to get it through all of this, I've been threatened by the APS workers that they're going to fine me for having extension cords on the floor and stuff like that, and they completely ignore the situation that we're crying out for help for. And instead, they're trying to enforce some kind of laws on me or penalize me for his living conditions, when all I'm trying to do is get him some better living conditions. So this a charity campaign to help him. If we can make this work, it's one of the only ways that I can see to save Steve's life, because he is a person that, you know, me and my family and many of my friends have come very attached to. He shouldn't be thrown away. It's a very much a shame what they do to people. And just since we've been going through this, I have seen so many other people that the same thing. If they don't mean a dollar bill to somebody, they just want to flush them. They just want to eliminate them, get rid of them. And it's very sad that we're in this state. I do think if we were somewhere else in the United States, we might be able to get help a little bit easier. Not much. I don't think there's much hope of getting help from the government.